So yeah, thank you very much for coming, everyone. I hope we'll have a really interesting discussion today. Today's webinar is about censorship in detention centres and refugee camps and in the refugee community generally. We'll be hearing testimonies from people who've experienced life in refugee camps and detention centres. And we'll be having a chat about several different topics within that. But first, I'd just like to introduce our panelists. We have Basil, who is Syrian from the city of Idlib. He's a PhD candidate and a member of the Centre for Ethnic and Migration Studies. He also has an MA in English Literature, focusing on identity, home, and belonging from a post-colonial perspective. And he's also got an ongoing MA with Aleppo University in Syria about 20th century American theatre. And then we also have Mirzai Mohammed, who is from Afghanistan. He's been living in Greece since 2006, and now he's the communication manager for the Afghan Emendar community in Greece. He came to Greece as a refugee, and he now likes to help other people who have recently arrived in Greece. That's a brief introduction, but I'm sure we'll get to know more about you both throughout the webinar. Before I ask the first question of you, I'd just like to say to our attendees that there is a Q&A box which you can ask questions through, and I'll relay them to our panelists. So if you've got any questions for anyone or for everyone, then please do type them out, and we will do our best to answer them. So without further ado, we'll start with our first question, which is, can you describe your own experience of censorship and the suppression of your voice or your ability to communicate with people? Basil, would you like to start us off with that?
Well, thank you, Daniel, and the whole team for inviting me. I'm glad to be here with you, with Mohammed, and hope we can have a fruitful discussion. Well, to answer your question, my experience, just to speak concretely, and the geography, it plays an important role. So when I arrived to Belgium, where I live now, actually, I was sent to a closed reception center in the countryside, south of Belgium, the French part of Belgium, for people who know the political context of Belgium. So it's already a city that's facing huge challenges, be it economic, be it cultural, be it political. And it's not in that city, it's just the countryside of that city. So it's even farther geographically from the center of any interactive life. Being blocked behind walls of a reception center, from which we have 1 day per month, a day where we can actually go out and see people. Well, I think we didn't have much of a suitable context to actually speak and to be heard. Additionally, the context inside the walls of the reception center was organized in a way that the purpose of this center is not to live in the street. Okay, so we take you, we give you a bed and a tiny closet, we feed you to stay alive until something happens. Well, with this policy, with this mentality, with this context around, there is not much, there is no space for actually speaking or being heard. So that's briefly my experience.
And may I ask how long you were in the reception centre?
Well, around more or less 4 months.
Mm.
4 months.
Okay, thank you. That
Well,
yeah,
It
that
was
sounds very. Sorry.
it was the during the well, few months after the reception crisis, so they needed to speed up the process of uh, evaluating cases if you are refugee or protection 1 year or you are not eligible. So they speed up the process to free spaces in reception centers. So for me, 4 months, I am lucky as a Syrian, I'm lucky to be there end of 2015, but for others, it's much longer.
Mm, absolutely. And that sounds very similar to the detention centre experience in the UK as well. Unfortunately, our panelist who is going to speak to as to his experiences in detention in the UK hasn't been able to make it so far. But I've worked with a charity supporting people in those centres in the past, so I can speak a little bit to that. And as you were saying, Basil, you know, it's very hard to integrate if you can never leave the centre. It's very hard to be able to really reach out to anyone in that kind of circumstance. Mohammed, could we hear from you, please, as to what your feelings are on that question?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me in this webinar. It's nice to meet you, Daniel. It's nice to meet you, Basil. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Mohammed Pirzai. I'm from Afghanistan. I'm living in Greece since 2006, and I'm working for refugees since when I came in Greece. Actually, in this last 1 year and a half, I'm the communication manager of Afghan MR community in Greece. In our time, it was very. We had a very. We had another law in every 4 years, as you see, in Europe. The laws are depend to the movement of the refugees. So in our time, it was very less people who came in Europe. The detention center, when you said this first reception was a bit less for 2 weeks or not more than a month. It was in other laws. And so detention center is very hard. It's very hard for everybody. Even you come for a day, it's very hard because you don't know what happening with you. You have a very hard feelings to say is that I don't know how long I'm going to stay here, yes or not. In our time, it was very bad because we didn't had any interpreters, we didn't have any information. It was very, it was another hard days. But during my life in Greece, in every new government, they have their own strategy. They have their own laws and system how to be long or less. I know that again every day it is very hard to be in the first reception, and I feel in these days when people who cannot move from the islands to Athens, for me it is like a detention center. It's a limitation that people don't have right to come to the to move from this city to another city. So these people are unlucky. And it is very hard when you are hearing their stories. It's where people are suffering psychological, and I hear a lot of time. Some of them they write on Facebook, some of them they are writing, talking with the journalists, some of them they are putting some videos. It is painful for me. Again, the open camps in the island seems like a detention center. So I think we have to look from different sides to say what we have to uh, how we have to change it, and what we have in our, what is our ability, and with what we can do for the people who are in the islands, who are in detention centers. In these days in Greece, we have already there's a lot of people who received rejections, and even in the center, they are in a detention center waiting for deportations, and we don't know with this government what happening with their dignity. We don't know that. If you have more question, I can answer you. I mean, if you make me question, because sometimes there's a lot of information, so I don't want to confuse the audience.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and we should absolutely have a discussion on how this can be improved in the future. And I think that's something that all three of us have worked on in different ways, is actually trying to improve the discourse around migration and trying to support people
Yeah, exactly.
who are recently arrived. It would be good to narrow down a little bit what we mean by censorship here, because I think some people have an idea that censorship is primarily around the kind of definition in 1984 by Orwell, where people are legally not allowed to say certain things. And of course, sometimes it can take that form, but I think it more regularly takes a lighter form, where people self-censor, where people don't feel safe in expressing themselves, or when people have their voice suppressed in other ways. So, for example, in British detention centres, people generally have their mobile phones taken away because they aren't allowed to record any audio or video or take photos of the inside of the centres and of how things are there. And I wonder if either of you have had any experience of anything like that. Because I know that a lot of the people I worked with therefore found it very difficult to communicate with their friends and with their family and with their lawyer and so on, because they'd had their phone taken away. And even if they were given another phone, then it was, it was a phone without the numbers in. So is that something that either of you have experienced?
Actually, I wanted to tell you that it is very hard, and when we are talking for censorship, it means it has 2 points. One point that uh, for refugees who are coming now, it is very, some of them they have very, I mean, they don't care. They know better than us. They know better than us what is the law of social media and why you have to take this video. And there is some reasons that you're taking some videos or publishing somewhere. In detention center, normally people, they don't have access to telephone, and because the police took them and they don't have right, just they talk with the card from, I mean, very simple phone. But in the camps, that what we have in the islands, before, it was people, they took a video, people they published their activities, what they had. But now, a month before, I think that from the Greek authorities, I just read from the some news is that people who are staying in Lesbos, for example, they don't have right to take a video from the area of the camps or from the bad situation of the camps. For me, it means two things, like maybe the government or the NGOs want to prevent the rumor that sometimes people are taking some videos and giving some message that should not, or sometimes people, refugees feels that I don't have my freedom to talk. And I think that we have to divide that. From one side, the government should not be put limitation for freedom of speech for everybody, but from other side, the refugees should find a way that how to record something or to say something with responsibility. Sometimes for refugees who are coming from their countries and applying asylum in a countries, it is very important. It is very important to thinking for their security. It can be like for the pictures or a video. You don't know what real for why what reason they are coming in Europe, and if we don't know how to take a video or where to publish, maybe with one video and with one picture, maybe we can destroy the history or the to do a very bad things for the refugees who are living in the camps. And I think in generally everybody should be find a journalist that we have in these days, and we should find people who make a documentary to share with them, to say how to talk or how to defend from their rights. For example, we have the Afghan communities in Greece. All of our board members, they are staying for many years here. When we publish something, some pictures or some videos, we take care of. First thing is the security of the people, and we will write like a text. Sometimes we take care, or all the times asking for the people, if you don't have a problem to talk on the video, if we take your picture, if anything that if you have any problems, please let us know before. I think that these things is very good, that with this modern time of technology, we have to ask everybody's, even we take a video, even we take a picture.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that everybody who is in any way interacting with this situation is responsible with the media that they're taking. I think you're spot on there. Basil, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, I would like to continue to continue where Muhammad actually has finished. Recently, with the movement of Black Lives Matter, if you press me too much, I will be in troubles because I don't know the name of the person who said what I'm going to say. But the idea is the important thing. He said or she said, racism was always there. It's not augmenting now. It's just simply we didn't see it. There was nobody filming racist incidents. So it's always there. We didn't see it. And when we start to seeing it, we start to feel. And I think it goes in line with what Muhammad was saying, like, and that's also why things in 2006, I believe, were were harder, because we didn't know what's happening there, what were the rules, what were the legislations, how files were treated and everything. It was just like a closed behind walls official process that nobody was, I don't want to say I don't want to say interested, but nobody has access to the information there. For my case, or for the case in Belgium, in this closed center, we used to have our phones and we used to have access to internet. So, but the problem is, and back to George Orwell, they were so good with naming things. So what they call it, it's temporary reception center. So you cannot argue with that. They say it's temporary, it's reception center, and we're not confining anybody's freedom of expression or of movement. You're allowed to do things, but there are certain measurements we need to take for your safety, and then for the common order. So the name or naming things or putting things in a way, they protect themselves. I think I will not leave the, the burden or the responsibility on us, refugees and asylum seekers only, to find or to improve the context. We need one out of two: the state or the civil society organizations. When the state fails to take its responsibility, civil organization should take over. And that's what we didn't see. Well, personally, I didn't see for 4 months in Florence, in this very small village where I was hosted. So I think there is a responsibility, and the responsibility is to be taken by the civil society organizations. They should be the link between people in centers and the outer world or the world behind the walls. They should do programs, workshops. Voila, this is your right. You can do this, you can do that. Maybe you can post it here. Maybe you can send a letter there. What I mean, I'm not good enough in this topic now to construct a whole mechanism of work, but I think, and that's proven after the reception center in 2015, for example, in Brussels, in Parc Maximilien. It's a famous park now because it was facing the Commissariat Général, the police station where people actually ask asylum. So in this park, towards the end of 2015, asylum seekers were sleeping and eating in that park for more than 2 weeks. And the state didn't do anything. It was the civil society who organized initiatives to host those people, to help them logistically, administratively, and everything. And some of these organizations or initiatives developed to be registered non-profit organizations. And some of these initiatives were just dissolved because, voila, the crisis of reception that was caused by the state and the state policies is not there anymore. So I believe the responsibility of the civil society organizations is major in this in protecting asylum seekers' right to speak. One of one important way to give voice to asylum seekers in general, and to refugees and to migrants, to include all, is actually through art. And that's where I am actually trying to mobilize what I have.
Thank you. That's really interesting. You made some really good points there. And some of it sounded very familiar to me, certainly, when you said that a lot of the difficulties with showing people what's actually going on is in the way that governments use much nicer sounding language than they should for their way of hosting people. So, for example, temporary reception centres. We have that same problem here where the British government says that they don't hold people indefinitely. And they say that their plan is always to try and keep people in a detention centre for a short period only. But we know of people who have spent more than 5 years in a detention centre, and obviously that's absolutely awful. In the UK, they don't even get the 1 day off a month that you said that people in Belgium get. Obviously, that isn't nearly enough either. So there's, I think there's a lot in common between the British and the Belgian approaches, it seems like. And I think you're absolutely right as well that NGOs bear a lot of responsibility for taking the lead from people with lived experience here. So yeah, thank you. There's some really interesting points there. Before I move on to the next question, I'd just like to say to our attendees that they can ask questions through the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer them if we have that information. The first question, which has been asked anonymously, is: has COVID affected government funding in these initiatives discussed? Is that something that either of you are familiar with?
You mean with COVID-19?
Yes, yeah, that's right. The pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic. It's more we have in Greece since March last year, and still people are suffering, and it affect a lot to refugees communities in Greece, because most of them they couldn't move from one city to another city. Secondly, because of unorganized situation in Greece, many people they couldn't follow education, they couldn't follow their refugees cases. So I mean, it was very hard years, not only for refugees communities, but for people who were working for refugees, even for the Greek societies. It was very hard. It's like I can say it's a tragic things for all of the world. So of course, the refugees they have to double pay if, because they don't know even where to go, how to go. It was very hard for them to communicate with the hospitals, with the doctors. So it seems that we had some refugees who died from COVID-19 in Greece. We had some cases. It is harmful. It is very, still we don't know when it's going to be finished, and people they lost their psychological so much, and still there are a lot of people they lost their families. They couldn't go, and they reject their cases because some of them they had an interview, they lost it. They had a family reunification, they lost it. Still there's people who lost their cash card, financial support that they had, and it affected a lot. I mean, I can say that it was the I don't think so that even when we finish with the COVID, people they can repair these situations in 1 or 2 years.
Thank you. It sounds like it's had quite a big impact on both funding and on people's ability to access services as well in Greece. Basil, do you know if it's had much of an impact in Belgium?
Well, it's a very good question actually, and I'm sure because in Belgium the reception system is not by the actual state, but it's just by a federation. federal government organization related. It's called Fidazil, and for this, I don't have actual information or numbers, as I am not actually involved now in works or projects with people inside or reception centers. My work is more with people who actually have the status of refugee. But it's very good question. Uh, Actually, I noted down because for me, for my personal information, it's very interesting, and I also ask myself if for the average citizen, this pandemic has limited their freedom. What is the effects of people who are actually inside camps already? So, and I hope this pandemic is not used to further uh, limit the liberty of asylum seekers.
I would have that concern as well, absolutely. And
Yeah,
because I find often these prices
I
are
would love
used to.
to. Sorry,
Go
Daniel,
ahead.
I would love to add that if you see that in Greece, we have fighting refugees in between refugees camps, because people who are staying, many people, I mean 2-3 thousand people uh, staying in one camp, and they don't have nothing to do, and because they don't know the language, and they are not they don't have, there's not this ability for integration, and so people mostly staying in the camps. This was the reason that people suffered psychological, and we had with the result a lot of fightings in different camps, and I think it affects double to refugees communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important point as well. And it actually leads into the second question that we've received from our audience, which is what arts and culture initiatives have taken place so far to give refugees a voice? And I think that's something that you could probably both speak to through your studies in your theatre group, Basil, and Mohammed through your community group work as well. So I'd love to hear what you've both got to say about that.
Well, it's just one small comment regarding the previous point. I'm speaking here to Mohammed. I mean, here there are statistics that says between couples, the separation and the divorce cases actually augmented because of COVID. So imagine people who do not know each other in a crowded refugee camp or asylum seeker camp. So it's it's a topic that actually people should consider. Well, about the question, so what art and culture initiatives are taking place so far to give refugees a voice? Well, in Europe in general, and that's what I'm specialized in, or I'm trying to study. Uh, in Europe, there has been, or there have been, many theater projects. Well, we have to know that there are two cultural centers, important centers now, where Syrian refugees are situated. The first one is Paris, and the second one is Berlin. Paris, because there was always this cultural connection between France and Syria through the cultural programs done by the French embassy in Damascus. So the links between established artists, Syrian established artists, and France is already there. This is one center. The second center is actually Berlin, because the most country or the most welcoming country was Germany, when they say, well, when Angela Merkel said the famous sentence, "We have done it before and we can do it again." So most of the young generation who are on their way to build their artistic careers actually moved to Berlin. There is, of course, initiatives in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in Sweden, and to a lesser extent in the UK, I believe, but they exist. For example, theater was one of the active artistic projects or artistic expressions where actually refugees were included. Uh, what we are trying to do recently here in Belgium, and more specifically in Brussels, is I'm working with a number of civil society organization, non-profit organization, to create workshops, acting workshops, and actually create plays. The writing process is by focus group, where actually Syrian refugees just meet, speak. People are taking notes. Sometimes it's videotape, and then we collect this data and we dramatize it. After actually introducing some non-professional refugee actors or people who are interested in acting, we train or we rehearse the script that they have already created and they stage it themselves. This is one way of actually making their voice heard. We are recently thinking of for this I'm working with many organizations. One of them is Sarana, one of them is Akh et Public, and recently we are preparing a project to actually use the method of Augustus Poal, or the theater of the oppressed. It's a very interactive form of theater or theatrical techniques where actually actors present or perform part of the scene, and they left the end or the solution of this problem performed in this scene to the audience. So actually audience who are there go up on stage and they continue improvise. They reflect their own on that problem, and this form of theatrical technique is guarantees a minimum the maximum level of interaction between the one and the other, between brackets. So this is one of the artistic or cultural examples. I cannot list all the cultural artistic examples here. I just give one tiny project.
Oh, of course. I don't think anyone would expect you to list off all of the cultural institutions in Europe, but that's a really helpful insight and a kind of window. Thank you. And Mohammed, have you had similar experiences in Greece?
I wanted to start in a different way. In our life, belief is very important things. How we can be a voice of refugees, or how we as a refugees, we have our own voice. Sometimes we have to, I think in our time, 2006, it was very hard. We didn't have a lot of, even in Europe, they didn't know a lot about what is difference between refugees and migrants. And all the times, if you remember, still there are some countries that they still to say it's okay, migrants and refugees, they are the same. In reality, they are not the same. So nowadays, from since 2015, there's a lot of people who, a lot of actors, a lot of specialists, a lot of lawyers, they came on the ground, especially in Greece, from all of the world, and they had a very big discussion to say that what is the difference between refugees and migrants, right? It's very easy now that the refugees can be have their own voice. For example, Afghanistan is a very strange country. It's more than 40, 45, 50 years we have war in Afghanistan. We have our generation outside of Afghanistan who grew up in outside of Afghanistan. We have a lot of communities in Europe, but there is one key thing that the communities should find a way how to cooperate with each other and how to find each other to find a way. And the new arrivals or new asylum seekers and refugees should accept or to find a way how to trust their communities. And then when they come together, they can be a very strong voice. And all the communities, they have cooperation with the local or with the international NGOs. And I think it is very easy that you can find like steps, like to find your voice or to find your rights. But the thing is that it means that if you trust to your community or if you trust the right person, this I believe that everybody should thinking to trust their communities, and then or to find a way to cooperate with even any NGOs. They can have good, strong voice.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that by integrating both into local communities and creating strong kind of communities of refugees within the local community, then it allows you to amplify your voice, doesn't it? And I guess it's the same principle behind unions, isn't it? That everybody is stronger together and people's voices together are much stronger as well. So yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. I'll move on to the next question that I've got for you, which is, what impact do you think censorship has on the day-to-day lives of refugees? Is that a difficult one?
You're expecting me to answer?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have picked on one of you, shouldn't I? Yeah, Mohammed, would you like to start us off?
Censorship has now. Thinking what I said first, it has two sides. If you thinking to be to save the refugees, sometimes it's very good that we take care of some stuffs, and if we feel that the government don't let us to talk, or we feel that we don't have our freedom, it is very bad things. That sometimes I think that if we see the positive sides, still we have this ability to talk. What other things that are, for example, we had in the community for COVID, or when before COVID, we had some classes. We had English classes, we had computer classes, we had theater classes, and even with COVID, we had the same things that we tried all the times to all the times talking for the security of refugees than to anything else. Because if you take some videos or some pictures and you don't know where you use it, it's become harmful for the refugees, not for the rest. So you don't know. This was that if refugees understand after to publish the video or the pictures, then it's very late. This is the reason that I feel it depends to us what kind of feeling or how we can understand.
I'm sorry for me. Would you please repeat the question because the line just disconnected?
Oh, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, what impacts do you think censorship has on the day-to-day lives of refugees?
All right. All right. Well, I would like to zoom out a little bit, and well, there is always I have read it. I have read this in a very nice book written in Arabic and Syrian, and then transformed to a TV series. Well, the writer describes existence as the globe. There are people who are just close to the center, and there are people who are gradually far from the center. And the closer you are to the center, the more heard, the more visible you are. Uh, and there are people who are actually living in a different planet. These people who are on the different planet are us. I'm using the words of that writer. So, as much as it's complicated for people who are actually living outside the planet to communicate, to interact, to live life with the people who are actually on Earth, figuratively speaking, this is difficult for people who are actually in reception centers and trying to find their way, explore the world, and try to actually speak up. I was too philosophical, sorry, but yeah.
No, not at all. No, that was really interesting. Thank you. And I think you're right. Often it does feel like people are very much speaking almost from different worlds. And I think that's especially the case looking between maybe refugee communities and local communities, or between individual refugees and the government, which often seem to be working in very different ways. And I know that I have personally seen refugees in the UK be really scared of disclosing crucial aspects of their case because they're worried about the way the government will respond. So, for example, I know people who who want to claim asylum on the basis of their sexuality because they're LGBT, and they are worried about disclosing key elements of their case to the government because they have heard from other people that the government isn't actually very sympathetic towards these kinds of cases. And sometimes I've seen that result in them then getting sent back to their home country where they're in danger because of their sexuality. It's really sad to see. And I think that is absolutely a form of the suppression of someone's voice. If you're too scared to disclose things about yourself because you're worried it will get you in trouble, or because you're worried that it might lead to persecution, then I think that is a real problem. And Basil, we've also had a question from the audience, from someone asking if you can share the name of the book.
Yes, it's called Four Seasons. I would try to look it up and share it now.
That would be great. If you could share it in the chat, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. While you're looking that up, I'll move on to our final question. Before I do, I'll just remind our audience that you are very welcome to ask other questions either in the chat or in the Q&A. And we'll do our best to answer those after we've spoken about this last question. So the last question I have for you both is what needs to change for people to feel more comfortable sharing their thoughts and experiences, whether that's in a legal capacity in their cases or in a kind of cultural capacity, or whatever angle you'd like to tackle the question from. While Basil is looking up the book, Mohammed, would you like to start us off with that? Sorry, Mohammed, you're muted.
Sorry. I think it is very good question, and let's see. We have. It seems that we have. Sometimes we should feel responsible. I think that we are working for. We are working with refugees for refugees because next generation should be better than us. And I think that our generation, we are responsible for new arrivals, how to help them to integrate, to opening the door for education, opening the door for their rights, or to support them. If we, as a community, we don't support the new arrivals in each countries, it is very hard for them to be integrated. As what you see is that we know, because we are from the same, we know the language, and we are from the countries that they came from. That's why we are playing the key role, how to help them to integrate easier than to any NGOs. So I think that all refugees should stand, and instead of this, that we have a lot of a painful story of new arrivals who are coming, who are suffering in the detention center in a way with the smugglers, with the violence, with the police, and many other stories. I think we have a lot of successful story of old refugees who came in Europe, or who have a very normal life, and they should stand and they should write the beautiful side of migration, and their experience can help the new arrivals to encourage and to be better than us. And I believe that we as an old refugees can be a good example for new arrivals, and we can, our present can give them energy to feel more comfortable and to feel more powerful. And this is the reason that I feel responsible, and I do what I do with for my people. And I think that the rest of the communities should do the same thing. And this is the way that we can make better society.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think that's a really powerful idea, that we should all be working to try and make things better for those who come after us, and to try and ensure that people in the future making the crossing maybe don't have to face some of the difficulties that you did, and that people today still are. I think it's a really powerful idea. Thank you. Basil, would you like to add to that?
Well, I would like just to stress the importance of cultural dialogue. I mean, normally what we understand from hosting migrants and refugees, and by using the word integration or assimilation, or we imagine, or we start to think of one group becoming a copy of the other, while what we need now is more a kind of interaction, cultural interaction. In order to establish this interaction, we need to build bases. cultural basis, political basis, social basis. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of efforts, but for example, very tiny detail, as you've mentioned, the insecurity of being rejected because of your own personal orientation. So if we reached a point where we are not threatened by who we are, then after that we reach the point or the level where we are encouraged to be who we are and interact with the context around us. I think that's the ideal situation where everybody develops. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort. Of course, at the beginning, I said, well, I would like to speak about art and the importance of culture and everything, because for me, it's something personal and, well, I believe it's really important. But just one example. For example, the literature produced by people coming to the United Kingdom in the 60s from the colonies. How would we imagine their experience without reading their novels, without actually watching their theater plays, without listening to their testimonies and their memoir, reading their memoir and everything? It's just one simple question. Sorry, one simple example. But voila, I think it says a lot. So there should be paces. On top of these paces, we build a platform for interaction and where everybody has the right to speak and to be who they are. This is this is a form, or this is a context. I will not say the ultimate context. This is a context to host a open, free, democratic society.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that those kind of building those kind of cultural bridges and amplifying refugee voices helps both in the present moment to create links between communities, but as you say, it also helps in the future as well to help people understand the experience of that time. So yeah, I think you're right. It has a kind of dual purpose there. We've had one more question, which I think will make our last question, since it's just past 6 now. We've had someone ask, are there safeguarding initiatives at refugee and detention centres for vulnerable people like children, women, people with disabilities and so on? The first thing I'd say to that is that, of course, it will vary enormously depending on the country and the management of that particular centre and the institutions that inspect those centres and things like that. So each of us can only talk as to the areas that we're familiar with. Certainly here in the UK, there are safeguarding policies, but they're of very variable effectiveness. And I've personally seen instances of children being locked up in detention centres and of people being held in centres who are incredibly vulnerable, for example, through severe mental illness and things like that. So although in the UK there are those policies, they often don't work nearly as well as you'd hope. Is that something that either of you, Basil or Mohammed, could speak to in your own areas of expertise?
Well, as you have mentioned, the one of the many things that the European Union states hasn't agreed on is the migration policy and governing migration. So it will vary even inside Belgium, even though the um, the so even inside Belgium, it varies from the north to the south and to the region of Brussels. To visit closed centers uh, is not a thing that average person can do. So you need authorization, you need legal authorization, you need a purpose, you need to be a part of initiative or group or program or so uh, actually very few people have access to centers. And where I was, I haven't seen or haven't experienced this myself. So I think for this you need someone with more experience, with more expertise in this topic than me to answer this question. Sorry.
No, no problem at all. It's something I'd always say to our audience that we'll do our best to answer the questions, but obviously it depends on whether it matches our areas of knowledge or not. Mohammed, is there anything you can add to that?
Daniel, can you repeat the your question again, because I just forget.
No problem.
What
So,
was the last question?
So the last question from the audience was, are there safeguarding initiatives at refugee centres for vulnerable people like children or women or people with disabilities and things like that?
I think detention center is not good for no anyone. It's not safe even it's not safe for vulnerable people, but it depends to the country where you are, right? If you are, for example, if you are in Moria with 20,000 refugees, it's not safe for no one. If you are no, it is not even we have to slowly even like theory, we have to start to talk not to be have detention center and how to prevent it. And I think we have this ability to do that. And if we stand all together, if we prepare something, it's like it's always when you want to create something, you have to create a platform for everything. We can prevent that. We should thinking for security of refugees already. There were a lot of we had a lot of we have a lot of or we had a lot of victims in detention center from vulnerable group, especially kids, especially women, and I mean even men. When you are not psychological, you're standing in a closed place, of course you are not in a normal mood. So then you don't I mean many things are happening. We have to honestly we have to stand together, and we have to start to talk. And the refugees or the people who are working for refugees, they should trust to each other. And when we trust to each other, we can bring it on the table and finding the solution.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you. And yeah,
Okay.
you're absolutely right. Of course, there will be much less in the way of safeguarding policies and initiatives in the huge overcrowded refugee camps than there might be in the much smaller detention centres, for example. As you say, if you have many thousands of people all in a tiny camp, then any safeguarding initiative is going to be a lot less effective, almost inevitably, really. And that's something we saw a lot of in Moria, for example, and in some of the camps in Lebanon as well. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Basil, were you able to find the link to the book?
No, the link to the book, no. I can send the link of the Wikipedia. It has all the information.
Oh, that'll be perfect.
Probably it's it's a first to all panelists. Hopefully from this, people who are interested, they can dig deep. This page is in Arabic, but there are options to choose the language. I hope the reader interested in this book can read Arabic. Otherwise, I will have to translate.
The person who asked the question does actually speak some Arabic, so I think that should probably be fine. But Wikipedia also
Perfect.
has some good links for switching over straight away to the article in another language, so I think that will be fine. So thank you for finding that.
It's made to a very, very famous TV series. It has the same name, the Four Seasons. So
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of our discussion today. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you've enjoyed participating in the discussion, Mohammed and Basil, and to the audience, I really hope you've enjoyed watching it. And we have some more webinars coming up. We have 2 in March looking at the impact specifically of the pandemic on migration and on refugees. So I know we had a question early on about that, and we spoke about that a little bit, but we'll have a much more in-depth look at that in March. So do keep an eye on our website and on our newsletter for more information about that. And I'd just like to end with a huge thank you to everybody for attending, and of course, especially to Basil and Mohammed for participating. It's been great to have you here. And it'll be lovely to have you along to one of our discussions again in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Danielle. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you for people who were with us and who asked all the questions. It was interesting. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you everybody. It's nice to meet, to see, to talk with everybody. Hope we are on the field. Hope to see you, and for better days for refugees and for all of us.
Oh, thank you. That is a lovely sentiment to end it on, and I think we could
time.
get on board with that. Thanks a lot, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.